Is it a devil pig? Or what is it? What do you think it is? Hey there, this is your pal Pallie, and welcome back to Overrated. This is episode number 45, and today's episode is the start of me doing some basic things and advanced things about logging. So, logging is a big subject for World of Warcraft, and there are a lot of intricacies, there are a lot of things to talk about here. So, today's episode is just going to be about how to log, how to use the clients, and I'm going to be talking about warcraftlogs.com and worldoflogs.com, both great sites with many different features and things going on. And then I'll be talking about just some very basic things on looking at DPS. So, why am I doing this episode? Well, number one, logging has... I did an episode, 30 episodes or so about this very subject and sort of gave some basic overviews, this and that. But I feel like I just need a complete series of guides on how to do this and how to do it well. It doesn't seem like a lot of people really have this subject nailed. They don't really... It's not like everyone's like, oh yeah, I know how to analyze logs, here's what I show, here's my conclusions, boom. It feels like there's a variety of people who can use logs for certain things, but I feel like the breadth of knowledge for using logs is just not out there. So, this is an episode of Overrated, which is, weekly vidcast, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to sort of take this episode, put it up as Overrated 45, but I'm also going to edit out, like me just talking about this stuff like here, and put sort of in a side episode, this is the basic guide to using the client, basic DPS, blah blah blah, and that'll turn into a series of all of this kind of stuff. So hopefully people get a lot of usage out of this, and it'll be too great. So anyway, the first part of this is going to be using the clients and how you start logging. So I'm going to do a lot of switching between monitors and web browsers and all that kind of other stuff. So first off, let me go to a web browser and show the different sites and how you get started with both of them. So, web browser, yay! Alright, so this is worldoflogs.com, and this is the site that has always been there. They've been around for a very long time and had the basic features and everything, and everyone sort of used them by default. Warcraft logs is a bit newer, and we'll talk about some of the features there as well, but pretty much they're comparable in terms of features. And this is not a let me compare the sites and whatnot, because whatever you use you can generally get the relevant information about. There's just some differences between the two. So worldoflogs.com, head there, and to actually get started doing this, you usually, for both of the sites, you have to sign up for an account. Okay, fine and dandy, I'm not going to really show you that. But once you're signed up and registered and whatnot, for World of Logs, there's a button here called Client. And that launches a Java client that looks a little bit like this. This right down here. World of Logs Data Uploader. So this has a number of options, and this gives you the ability, it's fairly simple. You can open a file, which is opening up any of these WoW combat logs, etc., and getting into it. And I'll talk a little bit later about how to get these combat log files. But anyhow, you can open it up. You can have the archives, which give you the actual logs from a certain date and everything. And some of this, again, there's documentation on how to use World of Logs itself. I'm just trying to give a basic thing. This would show you what start time this raid happened, when it ended, blah blah, give you some upload information. You would click upload, and then that would send this up to worldoflogs.com into your particular site, and you would get to look at it. So that's basics of World of Logs. Warcraft Logs is fairly similar. So back to the web browser. World of Logs also has a client. It's a more standalone client. I don't know if it's Java or not. But anyway, same kind of deal. You click Install Client after signing up and having all that other jazz, all that other good stuff signed up. Installing client, then you are launching it like any other application, and what you get there is this up here. This is the Warcraft Logs client. Again, there's some login information set up and whatnot, but similarly you can upload a log, live log, or split a log, which is similar to the functions here, opening up a file, opening up the WoW log, or starting a live session. But anyway, upload a log. You can choose a log just like we did with World of Logs, etc., etc. Choose this log, and it starts to do nothing because it's clicking on it a bunch. But anyway, similar process for using this to upload a log and doing stuff with the WoW combat log. So once you go through that whole process, it goes up to warcraftlogs.com, which looks like this. And again, similar stuff. We'll go through the sites here in a little bit, but anyway, this is how to use the clients and install them. So, taking a little step backwards, to actually use the clients themselves, you do have to have WoW combat logging on. In World of Warcraft, there are options for creating combat logs. So by default, just doing /combat log, typing that into your chat window, will turn on logs and log it to the log/WoW combat log.txt. To turn it off, you type in the same thing, /combat log. It says combat logging disabled. Now there's also another option that you're going to want to check out for advanced combat logging. So that is again under at the escape menu, system, and then network. And this advanced combat logging gives you a lot of extra data. And this is useful for both logging sites at this point. It used to be that Warcraft Logs was taking more advantage of this than World Logs, but now they're both taking advantage of all this advanced stuff. It gives you like positioning and just a whole bunch of cool stuff. So again, remember to enable that if you're doing logging. As an also aside, if you're using something like LVUI, which is what I've got, there are also add-ons into LVUI and other things that are called autologgers. So on LVUI, got this little extra add-on called autolog. Anytime I log into a raid instance or party, if I wanted to do that, it will start the logging up. So again, I don't have to remember and go, oh crap, I forgot and didn't turn on the logs. So anywho, that's just a quickie of how to create logs. Now, one more final thing on logs is that you do also want to make sure that you clear those logs out every now and then, and that's done in both of the clients. They both have the ability to sort of split and zip logs or do some stuff like that. So let me bring the clients back up and you can see what I mean there. So on World of Logs, that's this tools, split and zip logs. That lets you take this WoW combat log and it'll split it into archive files, which are all these zipped directories, and they're it's hard to see, but they are dated. There's the 15th year, first month, 30th day, and then the timestamp here of 2131 hours. So that's the kind of format that they've been using. You can see I've been logging since 2013 at least. A lot of log files there. But the point of this is that you want to do this splitting and zipping, or when you get through the Warcraft Logs client, at the end of it, and there's also other tools, you can split a log here, and that again creates those archives. It's actually Warcraft archives directory, which gives you these things which can be zipped and etc., etc. But anyway, same type of principle, splitting them so that they're more manageable of size. These Warcraft log files get really huge really quickly. So, a night of logging is like, logging a 3-hour raid or something, that's like 200 megabytes. I mean, that's not much. People have terabyte drives and everything. But, the thing is, those logs, as they get bigger and bigger, the game itself, when it's trying to log that stuff and write it out to the file, usually it's having to open that big file and writing to it, and that can start to actually slow down your game. I know, again, these days of massive computers, super fast hard drives, all that kind of stuff, it's not as big of a deal, but when you get like a file that's Warcraft logs file that's 2 gigs large, it's like, yeah, that's gonna slow down your game. You're gonna get some lag. So again, remember to do like I said, both of these clients will remind you and say, hey, do you want to archive this? Do you want to delete the old file after you've uploaded it, etc., etc.? Do you want to archive it? So take advantage of those and make sure your log file is, clean at least every raid week, if not every raid night. So cool stuff. Cool stuff. So again, that's a bit of overview on how to use the clients, how to upload logs, and sort of what you get in terms of the sites. So now for the last 20 minutes of this guide and this overrated episode, we're going to head to the web browser to take a look at what you've got and talk a little bit about what you can do as a basic DPS, or for what you can do to evaluate yourself in a basic way as a DPS class. So, logs are pretty much used probably the majority of the time to look about death logs, which again, another episode, another guide, but to look about why are the raids wiping, or to also evaluate how someone is doing for DPS heals tanking. So DPS is probably one of the more straightforward things that you can do in evaluating them. So both Warcraft logs and World of logs have basic damage done charts and numbers and everything. So here is a recent log of my paladin, Pallie Dinner, the namesake, doing a pug of heroic and our attack on the butcher. So again, damage done is the menu option I'm taking a look at here, and then you can pick the particular boss fight, kill, wipes, etc., to see what you need to see. For the most part, here's my big tip already that many people don't already know. If you're looking to evaluate someone's DPS, 99% of the time you're going to want to look at a kill, and here's why. Many classes have many different abilities that work based on a boss's or an ad's health. So for example, marksmanship hunters in this expansion and warlords, kill shot is pretty darn big in terms of their damage. Same with warriors. That execute is a pretty large portion of their DPS, and that only happens when you get down to the last third of the boss's health. So if you're trying to evaluate someone on like this wipe of Brackenspore or something, where we were only 2 minutes into it or something, that is not an effective evaluation of a person's overall DPS. There are many things you can learn from a wipe about where people are targeting and what they're doing DPS-wise. I'm not saying they're useless, but when you want to say this person is doing more DPS than this person, or this person is doing more DPS than this other person, same class or whatever, gotta look at a kill. Gotta look at a whole thing. I myself made this mistake early on in Warlords. I mean, I didn't know many of the class changes, and obviously I knew marksmanship hunters, and I'm like, oh yeah, once I get to kill shot, woo! And they had to nerf that early on. But I actually booted a warrior and replaced him in our raid when we were doing actually Mythic Butcher, or not Mythic, Heroic Butcher, because he was at the lower end of the charts, but we weren't getting to like the last 30% a lot of the time. So, my mistake for booting him out, because I didn't recognize that, oh yeah, once he gets to that 30%, he's going to catch up to people, and, I should have sort of known that as a marksmanship hunter. So I didn't. So again, big tip, if you're looking at someone's DPS to evaluate their overall DPS, look at a kill. So, going back to the charts. Heroic Butcher, you can see people's damage done. I'm going to explain some of these pieces of World of Logs and Warcraft logs. The same sort of stuff is valid for both of them. There's usually DPS, DPS-E, which is effective DPS, and then some sort of active time that says how much uptime were they, how many times were they hitting the boss, how much time were they not hitting the boss. So, in general, and I'll show you that same info over here, same kill, no, sorry, that's not the same kill. This is the same kill. Same type of stuff. Warcraft logs gives you some charts and whatnot, as did World of Logs. There's the active uptime, there's the actual DPS, effective DPS, same sort of stuff. And as you can sort of, if you sort of are checking out these numbers really quickly, you can sort of recognize that, actual DPS is when they were actually active, and effective is overall taking the whole fight, what was their damage, and splitting that up across the time. It sort of takes you to a place where it's like, oh, well, this person had an uptime of 32%. This is a healer, so again, I'm not considering that, but they did this much of damage during the time that they were active, but overall, for the time that the whole fight was going, they only really contributed 2.4k DPS. So this is the number that's used for rankings, used for most things on where you want to evaluate people. This number is just going to say, when they were hitting their buttons and things were happening, that's the amount of stuff they were putting out. Hopefully, if they have a high uptime, kind of like this person, 99.3% uptime, these are very close to the numbers, and as you can see, they are. So, active uptime for both of these evaluations is a very valuable stat to look at right away, because that sort of tells you, are they pushing their buttons as hard as they can, maybe not as hard, but as often as they can in order to get their most DPS out that they can. If you've got someone who's sort of active 97%, 90%, 95%, that's someone who is possibly handling some other things, and we'll get that, handling raid mechanics, and we'll get into that more in the advanced guides, but you want to look at someone who's in that high end of active time, because that means they're maximizing, pressing their buttons all the time, even if they're moving for mechanics, even if something else is happening, and they're also, in a position to DPS the boss and know what, something going on. Now, this is not end-all be-all. You can be hitting your buttons all the time, they just might be the wrong buttons, in which case your DPS will be lower. But active time is one piece to start looking at right away and go, okay, why are all our raiders not, in that 97 to 99 percentile, 99 being obviously the best. For myself, evaluating what I've got right here, according to World of Logs, I had a 98% uptime. I think I had something similar over here, 97.72, so close enough. Why was I not 99? Why was I not 100? Well, this is the Butcher, and he does do that whole leap out, and then he comes back into melee range with the tanks. Now, I could have probably gotten my uptime a little bit better by following the Butcher out as he leaps, making sure I don't get cleaved, but following his leap and DPSing him all the way back in. I probably could have gotten my uptime to maybe 98% solid or 99. But I didn't. This was a pug, we were trying pretty good, but We didn't. So little things like that where you can have someone push their DPS even more. Melee are going to have a generally harder time getting that uptime up for obvious reasons. Boss move out of range, tanks going over here, gotta stand here for some mechanic where they can't hit the boss, that kind of stuff. But in general, your raid should be trying to improve their active time. So, okay, I think we beat active time to death. Next up is looking at the actual damage done and digging a bit further into how are you executing from a class standpoint. So for that, I'm going to actually switch over to looking at my hunter because it's a little bit easier to evaluate stuff than it is for my paladin. So this is a Warcraft logs kill, and I'm trying to look for same thing. Oh, that's Twin Ogren. But anywho, this is a kill of, what is this kill of? Kill of the Butcher on Heroic. Again, Heroic Butcher is a nice, easy fight to look and evaluate things. So here is my hunter, Chablis, and I am playing, from the little icon here, I'm playing Survival. Now this is a spec that is based off of a lot of dots, a lot of things that you got to keep up, and a lot of maximizing your procs and whatnot. So clicking in to my name, you're able to get more detail on what was being done and what was happening. So there's similar capabilities over here for, say, this hunter on a Twin Ogren try. This was us wiping later. Similar ability to click in and look at damage by spell and look at the similar graphs and uptimes and whatnot. So going back to my chart on the Butcher, here are all of the things that I did to do damage. So explosive shot is usually one of the top things that a hunter's doing. You get the average number of times you hit, how much they were hitting for, times that they crit, times that they multi-striked, and the average time that they were up. So this means explosive shot was on something almost 50% of the time. This is, I don't know how do you say, there's a lot of procs involved in, well, there's not as many procs as are involved in Survival Hunters as there were. They're sort of guaranteed now a bit. So I don't know exactly what the uptime should be here for this. I actually just now switched from Marksman to Survival, so, but I do know sort of the uptimes for these next two. So anyway, this probably looks like a pretty good one based off of my other uptimes. So Black Arrow is the next damaging ability, and again, you can get a sort of hover over that shows you what Black Arrow is. Notice that it is a 30-second cooldown, and from this tooltip it's actually wrong for Survival. Well, it's not wrong, but it's saying it deals the damage over 20 seconds. It's actually 24 seconds because of a perk for Draenor. Anywho, it's complicated. Just know that it's 24 seconds. So that means, if we do a quick little calculator here, 24 divided by 30, at absolute best, Black Arrow should be an 80% uptime on a fight. So what did I have for uptime? 74%, 75%-ish. Cool. That's actually pretty darn good. Obviously, if you can get closer to 80, that's fantastic. It's one of the first things that should be shot from a Survival Hunter to get your procs of lock and load and get explosive shots going, which are obviously the most damaging abilities. But you can look at this and know that an uptime of blah is good or bad. Likewise, I said Survival was all about dots. The Serpent Sting dot is applied when they use Arcane Shot. It should be close to 100%. If you've got a lot of other procs going on, it may fall off for a few seconds, but Arcane Shot should be at least weaved in there in order to keep this up, because it is obviously the third most damaging thing that I've got here. So this is probably not a great uptime for a fight. This should be closer to 98%, 99%. It, probably not possible to be 100 because you're putting up a bunch of other things before you actually shoot, but anywho, you can see that. And there's also, I might add these little plus signs, and both of these are over similar stuff for Warcraft logs. You can sort of get up times on Serpent Sting. For this person, they had it up 91% of the time. Their Black Arrow was up 70% of the time. Their Explosive Shot was uptime of 43%. Same kind of thing. You're able to show, you know, those things. Oops, I didn't mean to click on that. Darn. Anywho, you can see a similar stuff that shows you what are people's uptimes with things. But hopping back to Warcraft logs, you're able to sort of click on this and start to create graphs that show the damage done by Serpent Sting and where it was there and where it fell off. It's a little hard to see when this fell off. But anywho, there's a million graphs on both programs that gives you even finer detail as to what was happening with all these different spells. Anyway, it's interesting, it's fun, there's lots of stuff that you can do with it. So that's sort of the basics of doing that. Now, that's basics of sort of one class. And because I know hunters fairly well, I'm able to give you some of those numbers and give you some of those, hey, this should be at this percentage, this should be at that percentage. If you're, hopefully if you're coming into this guide watching it for your own class, you're going to have to do some of that research to know what are the uptimes, what should I be doing, how should I be able to, on warriors, there's a lot of different other things to evaluate on that's different from rogues, that's different from paladins. There's sort of, bopping back to my paladins guides, what are you looking at for, let's take a look at my paladins guides over here. What are you looking at for your, the paladin? Are you looking for an uptime on something? Well, back when there was Inquisition, rep paladins did have something that needed to be tracked. That was Inquisition, and you had to, maintain a pretty large uptime on that. There is no such thing like that in Warlords at this point. There are just damaging abilities, there's procs of things, etc., etc. So you can see there's no censure, and certainly one that is an uptime on something. That's anytime you're hitting something, you are getting censure stacks and make sure it's all the way up there. But that's this is a 5-minute kill and I died. This is a wipe actually, which is one thing why you don't evaluate stuff from the standpoint of a wipe, because when did I die? Why is this uptime low? Well, that's because I was dead for a portion of this log. But for a rep paladin, there are other things that you're going to be evaluating, such as how many times Final Verdict, how many procs were used well, etc., etc. And that's fine and dandy, but you're going to have to know how to evaluate a rep paladin versus a hunter versus all those other things. So if you're coming into this as a raid leader or a GM, I don't recommend you just like diving in there and going, oh, well, World of Logs says his uptime on that censure thing was 89%. That should have been 100%. No. If you took a look at my hunter's logs over here and go, well, that Serpent Sting looks like it's pretty good. It's close to 100%, but that Black Arrow, geez, 75%? No, no, you don't understand hunters. You got to know that it's not possible to get 100%. So again, you got to do some research if you're coming into these and know what to look for the particular class. Certainly, I would recommend, if you are trying to evaluate someone's raid performance as a raid leader, as a GM, as a whatever, as a class officer, as whatever, that you do some hunting on forums, and even if you really don't understand a class, asking some class forums like on MMO Champion or other sites, hey, take a look at these logs for my hunter in my raid and tell me what they need to do to improve, as opposed to just hopping in there and going, well, this guy obviously doesn't know what he's doing. Now, if you don't want to post to other forums, what I would suggest instead, and if you don't want to go through that trouble and you're suspect of what's coming back, I would say that you should take a look at other people's logs, where, or maybe you know a hunter that you think is really good, or you can go and look at the logs of some top guilds on your server and take a look at their hunter and see what their uptimes were on all of this other stuff. It's fairly easy to do if you just look at wowprogress.com. Oh, here's such and such guild. Let me see if they log in Warcraft logs or World of logs. Take a look at some uptimes, blah blah blah. You're off. You're done. Now, that said, that I've given you some tips on some basic DPS stuff. We'll go into more advanced stuff in another episode. This one's getting a bit long and whatnot. But that said, if you are looking at someone's raid performance, looking at their DPS, you really, really have to know not only their class, but also the fight itself. You've got to know. You've got to know some things. So, if you're looking at a fight like Butcher, pretty straightforward. That fight is the DPS check of Highmaul. There are other fights in other raids all across all the tiers that are the DPS checks. So even looking back to, let's say, Cataclysm, there was Altraxian. You get to Altraxian, all people have to do is hit a button here and there. Otherwise, do your DPS, stand there, nothing to avoid, boom. That's what they call patchwork, because back in the Naxxramas days, a patchwork fight was just, you stand here, the tanks stand here, you just do as much damage as possible and make sure you get there. You're not moving for anything, you're not dodging anything, whatevs. So that is the DPS check fight. And there will always, I'm not going to say always, but there will very likely be one of those fights where the mechanics are fairly simple, and there's nothing to do other than sit there and DPS or heal your butt off. So, picking a fight like that to evaluate someone's DPS is generally going to give you a sense of this is their sort of maximum potential of DPS. Now, that's a good fight to look at. Butcher, even me on that fight, I give myself, as my hunter, I usually give myself the job of going in and out to activate which side gets cleaved and all that kind of stuff. Even then, that's so minimal of movement that I can say that my logs for that should be close to the potential that I can do. Although, you have to give the 15% raid leader debuff, like I should be doing 15% better because I'm calling out stuff. No, anyway. Whatever. Give raid leaders a pass. No. But that's their maximum potential. When you want to look at someone's DPS on a different fight where there's a lot of movement, say something like Twin Oghren or Korog for this tier, other tiers, there's going to be a lot like upcoming with Blackrock Foundry, Hansgar and Franzguk are going to be some ridiculous movement fights. You want to be able to see people do close to their maximum DPS on those fights, because that means they're doing well at managing themselves moving and as well being able to do DPS on the run, or stopping casting, then running to the next place, or as melee, being able to move the boss and move where things are happening, but also avoiding mechanics. So their DPS is certainly going to be lower. There's no doubt. For 90% of the classes, moving sucks. Hunters, we win. But anywho, their DPS should hopefully be close to what you should get, but it's not going to be this awesome maximum. So again, you have to take into consideration the fight itself as well. If you're trying to evaluate someone, again, that's what we're doing here. You might also have to take into consideration what job or what mechanic they might be asked to handle. So say on Brackenspore for High Maul, is this someone who's the flamethrower person, and are they doing it to gain stacks and do massive damage, or are they doing it just in case to clear out stuff and make sure we don't lose DPS to the boss getting healed? Or are they also being asked to do some sort of particular mechanic on a fight, like Korog? Are they being asked to be one of those people who soaks the shield up and then has to soak the balls all over the room, which means that they might be out of range of the boss, etc., etc. There are, and as well, you need to know if they're, and that those are circumstances where someone's DPS are going to be lowered relative to the rest of the raid. There are certainly circumstances where the DPS is higher than what you might expect for their maximum. So for example, I got hit with one of these examples myself, and I was like, oh yay, I did well. Oh wait. So on Mythic Kargath, the little cats come out, and whenever they run into the fire, which is what you're supposed to do with them, they run into the fire and they like go around like they're on fire. You're actually doing quite a bit more damage to them while they're on fire. So I myself assigned, while we were doing that fight, I assigned myself to be doing a lot of the damage to that cat to get it down and make sure it was down in time for the next one coming out, etc., etc. And we only had, I don't know exactly how many DPS we had on it, but let's just say we had 5 or so. I was one of those 5, and I was pretty hard hitting as a marksmanship hunter. Maybe it was survival. I think it was marksmanship. So when I was hitting them, doing a nice Chimera shot on them, it was hitting for quite a bit. And add some crits in, and yay. So I look back on that fight, and some of my DPS measurements for that fight were just terrible, like my uptime on sniper training and etc., etc. But my DPS was like 2nd or 3rd or something. It was like, whoa, what happened here? The reason was I was mainly attacking that cat through the 3 or 4 minutes of the fight, so I was doing quite a bit more damage overall because of that, extra damage buff. Meanwhile, the, shaman in the raid were attacking the boss, and they were probably doing comparable numbers, but they weren't getting that buff. Likewise, the people who were hopping into the crowd, those people were doing quite a bit more damage too, because they were getting to do massive amount of AoE, so we were sending some good AoE classes to do that. So you have to look at and know the fights a bit in order to effectively evaluate someone's performance on a fight itself. So, lessons learned here. Take a look at logs, know how to get them set up. There are many guides, both Warcraft logs and World of logs both have great, help resources and whatnot to get you set up. Start doing the logging. Make sure you check the whole advanced logging check mark in the game itself, and you'll be uploading logs. When you start doing some basic DPS measurements, number 1, you got to know the class a little bit. You got to know some of the mechanics, and number 2, you've got to know the fight that you're using to evaluate people. Make sure you're using a fight that doesn't have a lot of extra mechanics, a lot of cleave or this and that, and if you're comparing that log to someone else's, make sure you know that there's a difference in maybe approach to the fight, a difference in item level, of course, and a difference in overall approach to that particular fight from a DPS standpoint. So lots of things to keep in mind. Make sure you keep them in mind, and make sure you're objective about what you're evaluating. Certainly you can't take a 50k DPS result from a mythic Kargath and compare that to a 30k DPS butcher heroic kill and go, well, obviously the person doing 50k on Kargath is better than the 30k butcher person. No, you've got to compare apples to apples as much as you can. So anyway, that is my first basic piece to evaluating DPS. Next episode we'll be talking probably about advanced DPS evaluations. Down the road we'll be talking about sort of damage taken from a raid standpoint, from a raider perspective. We'll get into healing. Healing's going to be pretty complex, maybe 2 or 3 episodes on that. There's a lot going on with healing. And likewise, there'll be a few episodes and guides on tanking, because that can get complex too. But hopefully this has been useful for you and your raid. Please subscribe to the channel. I'll be coming out with more of these episodes, and it'll be hella useful for people. At least I hope so. Anyway, this is your pal Pallie, and this is episode number 45 of Overrated. And again, please comment, like, subscribe to the video if you found it helpful. And we'll see you next week in terms of broadcasting this live. I do this live on Twitch, twitch.tv/GetterRaid. And the YouTubes for the videos, and check out World of Logs and WarcraftLogs.com for all your logging needs. Alright guys, thanks for watching and have a good one.